welcome back. Now that we have a fully functioning moving player, the next thing for us to go back and add in is that player's ability to check for collision. So when we're checking for collision, we likely want to just really know, are we colliding, yes or no? And the actions will change depending on whether we're colliding with a gem or we're colliding with a baddie. So our collide method that we're going to have likely should be one that tells us yes or no. And so when we're answering that yes or no type question, we need it to be a Boolean. So I'm going to go ahead so that the computer isn't mad at me and throw in a return false statement here, just so that way I am in fact returning the type that I said I should be. Now, player has its own variables, x, y, and size. So the player always knows where it itself is. But the player knows nothing about where the gems are or where the baddies are. So it's possible and very likely that we need to give the player that information. So we need to pass in some information about the other thing that we're checking's x value, its y value, and probably also its size. If we're going to go ahead and let everything else be squares for our game, we need to know where is that thing and also how big is that thing to know, are we colliding with that thing, yes or no. So those are all things that we need to add in to our collide method right now inside of our player. So that way, in graphics, we could say, go do some check and see, is player colliding with this baddie? Is player colliding with that baddie? And the way that we would do that would be kind of like this for right now. We could say something like, actually, I'll leave that and show you that later on. Let's talk about how we would do the colliding first. Yeah, let's start there. Changing my mind. So I'm going to hop over onto my iPad so we can draw out these scenarios a little bit. Hello, folks. Welcome to the iPad version drawing out this Gems and Baddies game. So I've got a gem that is drawn in as that red square, and I've got my player that's drawn in as that green square. And what I'm trying to figure out is, for that collide method, what does it mean to be colliding? So I've got a player. That player is going to have an XY position. And for right now, for this scenario, we're going to think about this gem as being the other thing to consider. So it has the location or the position other X, other Y for right now. So if we're thinking about this player that moves throughout our screen, our player could collide with this gem in a variety of ways. It could hit from the left side, it could hit from the bottom, the right side, or the top. Technically, yes, it could hit at a perfect diagonal, but that would count as hitting at both the top and that right side at the exact same moment. So we want to consider, what does it mean to hit from any of those sides and make sure that all are being accounted for. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we need 4 separate checks. That just means we need to be sure that when we do our one check, it's accounting for all of those situations. Because if we just check in the Y direction, overlapping in the Y direction but not the X would not be enough. Or if we just check in the X direction, overlapping in the X's but not the Y's is again not enough. So we need to make sure that we're overlapping in both the X's and the Y's. Okay, so let's consider this first situation. Overlapping in terms of the X's here, let's think about the right edge of the player hitting that left edge of the gem. So my right edge of my player, ooh, that's a little too thick, is drawn here in yellow. And the left edge of my gem is going to be drawn in here in orange. In order for those to be truly intersecting or overlapping one another, that yellow line is going to need to surpass that orange line. If that's happening, then at least for some situations, we are in fact overlapping. Right here, we are overlapping in a way that if our Y's matched up, I would actually hit the gem. There are still situations like this that even if our Y's matched up, we wouldn't be. So not just checking these sides, but this is the first part of our check that we need to do. So if we're thinking about in our code, we want to know if that left edge becomes greater than, that right edge of the player becomes greater than the left edge of the gem. So the way that we would do that is, let's think through, what does it mean to be the right edge of the player? What does it mean to be the left edge of the gem? Well, right edge of the player is really talking about this line right here, if here's my this is my x, that side will be x plus the size. So this is really x, plus size. And remember, we are inside of the player variable overall. I should write that up here at the top. We are inside of the player class, and we are inside of the collide method here. So things like x and size are referring to that player. To access the gem's left edge, we need those other commands or other variables. So to get that left edge, that would just be our other x. Okay, great. So we've got that first overlapping. However, just those two lines overlapping does not necessarily mean that we are in fact going to collide. If I'm over here, they aren't yet overlapping. As soon as I hit this moment, they are overlapping. But guess what? I shouldn't consider this as overlapping, and for right now, my yellow is larger than my orange line, so it would be considered. So there's a second bit in the x direction that we also need to consider, and that is the other two edges, namely that blue edge of the player or that pink edge of the gem. And those also need to be overlapping, but in a backwards fashion. In order for my gem, if the y direction was working out, in order for my gem and my player to intersect, we need the yellow line to be bigger than the orange, but we need that blue to be less than the pink, considering it like that. But let's consider the other situation. Check it out one more time. What if I'm like this? Still the case. Yellow is bigger than orange, but we want blue to be less than pink. So the second part of the if statement that we need here is we need to say that the blue is actually less than that pink. Blue is less than the pink there. So let's go ahead and move some stuff around so I actually have space to add in that little bit of code. Lovely. Okay, so what does it mean? How do I talk about that blue? Well, blue is nice and easy. Blue is that left edge of the player. That's just plain old X. And then to get that pink, the right edge of the gem, that's using both other X and other size. So that one, ooh, I'm going to squeeze it in here, is other X plus other size. There. And that accounts for all of our X positions. Okay, now we're fully, for sure, overlapping in the X direction. However, that is not enough because the situation right now would deem that this if statement is true, and these two objects are definitely not colliding with one another. So the next thing that we need to do and consider would be thinking about that Y direction. And the same thing is going to be true here. In order to collide in the Y direction, well, the top of my player needs to cross over the bottom of my gem. As soon as that happens, boom, we've collided. So we need to be in kind of that situation right here. And at the same time, we need to make sure that we haven't gone too far. So the bottom and the top of the gem, bottom of the player and the top of the gem. So let's consider that in pieces first. Okay, top of the player, bottom of the gem. I'm going to run out of colors here, but for a moment, I think I got it. What I'm looking for here is these two things would collide if the purple line became higher than that green line. And going higher, if you think about what it means to be a Y position on a graphics window, would actually mean that that purple is less than that green. So inside of my first if check, I'm going to do another one. And what I'm looking for here is that purple is higher, which means less than that green. And I'm going to go ahead and keep, oh no, I left my shapes in a position where I'm not going to be able to move them again. Let's see and try to get what I can. I'm not going to be able to save my X and Y, but that's okay. I saved most of it. All right, so this last bit that I want to do is going to be those other final two sides, and let's see if I can find enough colors to make this one possible. Let's see if I use neon pink. Yeah, that looks different enough. And then maybe a bright orange. Yeah, that's different enough. It looks similar to the yellow, however, so maybe let's see, what else do I have? A bright blue. Okay, there we go. So the last situation that we need to consider is that pink line and that blue line. Well, what must their interaction be? I am intersecting at this moment. Pink is below blue. I am intersecting at this moment. Pink is below blue. I am intersecting at this moment. Pink is below blue. I'm intersecting at this moment. Pink is below blue. So what we need for any of those types of intersections here is we need that pink line to be below that blue line. So at the same time, I guess I should throw in our and. At the same time, we need that pink line to be below that blue line. So pink is below, which means it is greater than that blue line. All right, so let's go ahead and turn that last little bit into code. Boom, it's coded. All right, so now that we have it in its coded form rather than its color form, if we make it inside of both of these if statements, what does that mean? Yes, we are in fact colliding. So for that collide method, what do I do to say yes? Well, that would be the situation where I would go ahead and return true. So I would go ahead and return true from that moment. So that means that I've then colliding either this direction, that direction, or that direction. Go ahead and pause the video if you don't believe me when I showed you those 4 different types of collisions and walk through those checks. I left all of the sides of these shapes color-coded, and I left the code color-coded as well, so that way you could check to make sure that all of those if checks are true for the situations there. However, if you believe me, we're going to jump back to, if you believe me, or if you're on board, you're on the same page, you're understanding where I'm at, we're going to jump back to IntelliJ and type this code into IntelliJ. I went ahead and screenshot that part of the code from my iPad and moved it on over to my computer so that we can have it right here at our disposal while we are programming for that player. So let's go ahead and in that player, let's see what we've got. Can I move this further so I can see all of that code? Beautiful. All right, so here's what we do. Inside of my collide method, I've got some checks to do. I want to check if x dot plus size is greater than that other x. And at the same time, that x itself is less than that other x plus other size. So that is right edge of the player colliding with the left edge of the gem or baddie, and the left edge of the player colliding with the right edge. And when I say collide, I mean overlapping, sorry. Then we want to do if y is less than other y plus other size, and at the same time, y plus size is greater than that other y. And so that would be the top edge of the player overlapping the bottom edge of the gem slash baddie, and the bottom edge of the player overlapping the top edge of the gem slash baddie. And if all of those conditions are met, we're going to go ahead and return true. If any of those are not met, we would be in a situation to return false and say, no, we are not yet colliding. Okay, so I'm going to close that image. So now let's go test it out. Let's go test it out on both our gem and our baddie, just to make sure that it's working. So what we're going to want to do is inside of our code, let's go ahead and put it down after all of our player movement for right now. We're going to say, just do a check. If P1 dot collide, and let's go ahead and say that if P1 collides with that gem first, so we're going to say G1 dot X, G1 dot y g1 dot size. If that's the case and P1 is colliding with the gem, for right now, we're just going to go ahead and do a check. So I don't necessarily need my action to be perfect, but let's say for the sake of the argument that we actually increment that player's life. So P1 dot lives plus equals that gem's value. So whatever the value of the gem is. A little note here, plus equals is the same as saying P1.lives is equal to P1.lives plus. So it's the shorthand of doing that part again is you turn it into a plus sign and then an equals. Cool. So we'll go ahead and say that. And then also just for debugging purposes right now, I'll make a print statement that says collided with gem. And then we're going to do the same thing for the baddie. So now if P1 dot collide with that baddie, so B1 dot X, B1 dot Y, and B1 dot size, then what we should do is we're going to say P1, and we're going to go ahead and use that reset method because we know how to do that. We're going to also then decrement the lives. So we're going to say lives, and then you can also say minus equals, and we'll subtract off whatever that baddie's damage level is. And then for debugging purposes, we will say collided with baddie. Excuse me. Right now for us, there's only one gem and only one baddie, so saying that is not super confusing. And we're going to go ahead and run this and test it to make sure that it works out. So let's do that. Run this program. I can use my arrow keys to make my player move. That was the last video. Now, when I head over to this baddie, which is the blue shape that's right here, when I overlap with it, we see collides with baddie show up, and I reset. Now I'm going to try to hit that baddie from the top. Boom, reset. Let's go try to hit that baddie from the right side. Boom, reset. Let's go hit that baddie from the bottom. Boom, also reset. Lovely. So our baddie seems to be working so far. Let's go try to collide with that gem. Awesome. Colliding with the gem is going to happen over and over and over again. Reason being, I'm staying in place. The gem is staying where it is. So the thing that we would want to do from here is actually reset that gem. So the one action that we might want to put in here so that we don't collide forever with that gem is resetting that gem's position. Now that could be a method that we add into our gem or something that we just hard code right here. So we could just say g1.x and use a math.random variable. Math.random. Cool. And we'll multiply it by 600. And then do the same thing in the y position so that it ends up somewhere else. Or if you wanted to, this could be a moment where you create that gem and say, turn these two things into a method inside of here and make something called like public void respawn that would reset those positions. Up to you. I'm going to go ahead and just hard code it for now, but if you would prefer to have that be a method, do it. So now we'll run this one more time, see what happens when we collide with the gem this time. We move down, we move over. Goodness, my player's a little bit slow, but that's okay. Boom, collided with the gem one time, gem moved to a new position. Looking good.